Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Reframe Series podcast. So, this podcast helps us to unpack what it means to be Desi locally and globally. And before we get started, please hit the like and subscribe button so we can continue bringing you more content. So, today we have Mrinal Gokhale with us. She is an Indian American writer with a special interest in psychology and wellness. As a former freelance journalist, she has worked for minority owned publications in Milwaukee, the most segregated city in the United States. Though she has covered many events on Mental Health Awareness Month in the Black and Hispanic communities, she felt there was a lack of education surrounding Asian mental health and strived to change that. Her aim is to help other South Asians navigating mental health journeys in the western part of the world feel less alone and to promote education and acceptance of mental health in South Asian communities. Her book, Saaya Unveiled, South Asian Mental Health Spotlighted, shares 11 true stories of second generation Indian, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi immigrants and how they navigate mental health in the West. From topics like identity, culture, religion, socialization, academia, love, loss, and trauma, each unique story unveils a part of the shadow, Saya, of mental health in the South Asian diaspora. Each vignette has two parts: the interviewee's origins and how they got to where they are today. She aims to increase education and acceptance amongst the South Asian community, while also showing non-South Asians how intersectionality looks like in the diaspora. So, first of all, I wanted to say this book was really well written and it exposed so many issues around mental health and wellness within the South Asian community in a very kind of easy to digest and thought provoking way. So, I just wanted to congratulate you on doing such a wonderful job. And I think that this book will really positively impact a lot of folks. So, just congratulations. Yeah, definitely. And I think I would really be interested to know, can you tell us a little bit about your own journey with mental health?
Sure. So, growing up, I faced a lot of social and academic learning difficulties, and this included a lot of shyness and social anxiety, difficulty making friends, difficulty with social reciprocity and social cues. On the academic side, it included difficulties with executive functioning, concentration, following directions, multi-step instructions. So I think that things like gender as well as ethnicity played a role in why I was never evaluated or treated for those things until the age of 20 when I pursued it on my own in my college's clinic. So when I went to college therapy in my college's clinic, they used cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy to treat me for social anxiety, and I achieved a lot of good results from that. However, I struggled a bit in the working world a few years following graduation and reattended therapy again in my almost mid-20s. And that particular therapist said that she feels that I am on the autistic spectrum. And from then, my journey continued to expand to not just therapy, but things like medicine, holistic practices like yoga, meditation, acupuncture, holistic dieting, and so much more. And it hasn't stopped.
That's really great that you were able to kind of get yourself so much into so much better of a position just by kind of learning about yourself and kind of these parts of yourself. And so and also at the same time, very sad that it took until the age of 20 to get to that point.
Yeah, and it is a lifestyle, and it's one that's continuing because it didn't start as early as it should. But hey, something good came out of it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd love to know what influenced you to actually want to write about mental health in such a way for the South Asian community.
Well, so you read a little bit of my bio. So I've been working as a freelance journalist for quite some time. I wrote for a Black paper and I wrote for a Hispanic paper. And in I've a few May's, since May's Mental Health Awareness Month, I covered events for both papers regarding just that and covering the stigma surrounding Black and Hispanic communities around mental health. And I think throughout that time, I was like, how come there's nothing about Asian communities? Uh, there's not these sorts of events in Asian communities. Well, I think part of it is because the Black and Hispanic community in Milwaukee are somewhat bigger, for one, and I just wasn't really looking in the right places. So it was never really a goal of mine to write a book, but I took a free memoir writing classes in quarantine when I was stuck at home, towards the beginning of the pandemic. And that teacher taught us about the art of self-publishing your book. And I didn't know that you don't have to hire a publishing house to publish a whole book. And I met someone coincidentally around the same time that was published on Amazon Kindle, which is how I'm published. And she guided me through the process. And when writing my book, I just kind of brainstormed topics of interest to me. The human brain and psychology has always been one of them that fascinated me since I was a teen, like high school. So then at that point, it kind of came back to me how, I've never met any Indians or Desi folks with therapy who have gone to therapy such as myself. And I was like, well, this would be interesting to investigate from a journalistic standpoint. So I literally just typed in South Asian mental health into Google, and unexpectedly all these organizations popped up, and I reached out to them and they gave me people that were eager to tell their stories.
That's really great. So many more questions about that. Um, what so you talked a little bit about kind of gathering these stories. How did you select the kind of stories that you chose to share in the book? And for folks who are going to read it or want to learn a little bit more about it, there's so many really great stories in there about folks who are studying or struggling with things like ADHD, or there's depression and anxiety happening in the home, or folks are experiencing anxiety themselves, as well as going through a variety of different personal challenges. There was so much breadth and depth into all of those struggles in there, and I'd love to know like what went into the kind of your selection of those stories.
Well, luckily, I didn't have to turn anyone down, because I got just enough interested parties that I could, make it on time. And basically, I just said I typed, like I said, I typed in South Asian mental health into Google. I reached out to them, told them what I was doing, and said, do you know anyone who's interested? Can you put out a submission call on your social media? And then people reached out to me. So literally all I was looking for was people with mental health journeys to share. At first my thing was, I was expecting people with like a diagnosis, to talk to me only, but then I got people who said they were never officially diagnosed with anything or never even sought any therapy. But as I spoke to them, I still felt that their story was worth telling. And then I was like, well, this is good because it'll show people that the route to treatment and self-improvement when it comes to wellness and the human psyche doesn't necessarily have to be linear. And what works for one person doesn't work for another.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what I really loved about like all of those stories, it's awesome that like you just found the exact right people, which is that's so cool. And I think it says a lot to folks who maybe want, they envision a world that's different, and they're but they struggle with thinking about like how do they actually go about the process, or how do we go about the process of creating that world. And for you, it was like this just like very first simple step of like reaching out and connecting, and then using that like using your writing skills to kind of build a community and get folks to share their stories around mental health was like a very like first step to being able to do that.
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
What did you face any challenges when you were doing those interviews of like what is the amount that people are willing to share publicly versus like the kind of hold back from sharing because it's such a public kind of document that's being written?
I would say that, so I told people that they should only share what they feel comfortable sharing, so long as there's not like holes in the story. So then I would say that it got challenging to talk to men. So there, of the 11 stories, only two of them were men. I was really hoping I could find half girls, half guys, but no matter how many outlets I reached out to, only girls would be interested in speaking to me, which is kind of a whole nother topic. Um, but I did notice with the men that I did speak to, it was, I feel like I kind of had to really dig and pull teeth to get something of substance out of them rather than just regurgitating facts and to get them to talk about like their feelings and stuff.
That's such an interesting observation, and I wonder like what might be contributing to that. But definitely like a whole discussion for like another time. But yes, definitely like a very interesting point that you pull up.
And I will tell you, I am already in the process of writing a second book. This time, I did thankfully find more men that have a desire to tell their stories. I don't know if it'll be half and half, but that's the aim. And I am no. I wonder if it's because in this 1 year, more advocacy efforts have started to finally help men be more comfortable to open.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm excited to have you around for round two. I'd love to know, were there strategies that you used to help people open up and share their deep personal stories? Because a lot of these stories, I think a lot of folks could have reached out to the same people, but I don't know if they would have gotten the level of depth that you got just in reading those case studies of these individuals. It's just like you were able to really draw out a much deeper level of connection from them. So yeah, I'm so intrigued as to how you approach that, and like were there any like specific things that you said or did that kind of created that kind of environment?
So I would say one thing I struggled with, if you want to call it that initially, is, when I'm a news reporter and I'm at events, I just go up to people and ask the question, just like that. And I think that that's helpful there. I think that when it came to writing this book, though, the topics were a bit more sensitive. And I think I had to kind of remind myself not to be so straightforward in doing so. So then what I did is I asked somebody else for advice who works as a therapist. And then they encouraged me to develop an intro script before I speak to them, where I say to them, we're going to talk about sensitive things. Some things may or may not be triggering to you. Let me know if you need a break. Let me know if you don't want to discuss something, that kind of thing. And then also at the end, it's like I let everyone get a read through of the story and tell me if they approve it as well. And then also I would say that I wonder if my straightforward personality and just asking questions maybe had something to do with it too. Whereas someone might be like, I don't know if this person wants to talk, and then kind of get shy about it. Whereas I guess I don't process things that way, and I just go right for it.
Yeah, and I feel like this trait lends itself really well to like the journalistic field. You get to like, you show up as that sharp person who asks the really great questions.
I would say it's a dual blessing and a curse.
I think most things are in life. My personal experience has been sometimes there's a lot of dualities, and there's a lot of strengths in being different, and I think oftentimes we don't see that until we're put into the situation in which that strength is really brought out. um, and I think journalism is just that thing for you.
Right.
um, that being said, I do hope that like you're enjoying this process of like of doing the writing.
Yeah, and it has taught me a lot about myself too. I would say that once I read the book, I kind of felt a sense of healing too, and seeing that there's people who look like me, that come from the same culture as me, who have mental health related journeys, who have been to therapy before, who have struggled with wondering what's wrong with them and not having answers, who have come from families that didn't, act on their struggles, that kind of stuff too. And then it also taught me that, and then I also got into the world of public speaking, like I'm doing with you right now, which I thought I'd never be capable of doing or even enjoy.
Yeah. Well, so there's so many pieces to that as well. So I think something I will just say personally, one of the things that I most enjoyed about going through your book was that growing up, this idea of like mental health and um, kind of successful case studies of people who, like, when they had mental health issues, were able to like navigate them, get to the other side, or just learn how to manage them in a successful way. It like was never, like I'd never heard about that sort of thing. And like even just mental health as a concept or therapy as a concept was just like not ever like discussed or open. And so when I was reading this book, like it was nice having the case studies, but it was also nice that there were a lot of like positive results that like you could see from the stories about how therapy was able to kind of help these individuals change their lives and kind of just make them healthier, happier individuals. Because they were able to learn some coping strategies or some techniques that or were able to get the proper sort of medication that they needed to be able to kind of live their life in kind of just a from a better space, from a better mental space. And so um, I just really deeply appreciated that. um, Something that I did notice as a theme when it came to discussions around mental health, like for these individuals, though, was that there was a lot of pushback from family members from family members or extended family members around why therapy might be needed, why any kind of like medication might be needed, and I wanted to ask, like, um, have you personally faced any of those types of challenges? And for even the folks that you were interviewing, like, were there any kind of strategies or approaches that you felt were like effective in dealing with those types of situations?
So I think so. Yes, I have faced, in terms of, like I told you, I never got evaluated for anything when I was a kid. I think that that has something to do with, half kind of being in denial, half kind of like not being educated and exposed to it. Being that I was a '90s baby. Now, my parents, I noticed, seem pretty neutral minded about my going to therapy, but they vehemently disapprove of me taking medications. And that's something that no matter how hard I've tried to get them to see from my perspective, is something we just won't ever see eye to eye on. So now, as far as the book, I think that you probably noticed that a lot of people, with time, their parents' viewpoints changed, and the pattern was that when people's illnesses got severe is when they finally started to wake up. Which isn't healthy. But I think that a lot of people will tell you, it's a process to educate the elder generation of immigrants. And, every family might need a better approach, or a different approach. And that, at the end of the day, you might have to accept that there's some things that they will absolutely not bend your way towards. Branching off of that, I think that the more people I talk to, like a lot of people would say things like, in India, there was no therapies and that kind of stuff. And when they immigrated from there to here, they didn't pursue any therapies when it came to the trauma of adjusting to a whole new life in a whole new country. And I think that people have mixed feelings about that. From my personal viewpoint, it's like, I try to kind of look at it from that standpoint, but at the same time, it's like, doesn't the Constitution state that when you come to the US, it's about pursuing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not just survival, but happiness? Like, isn't that what we all want? And shouldn't happiness include wellness and not just survival? And shouldn't you want your kids to do the things that you didn't do, such as going to college, such as pursuing self-improvement, even if it's by hiring someone to help you do that?
Those are all really good questions. I think, like, personally for me, I know therapy has been so effective in helping me deal with the grief of having, yeah, the grief of like having a brother who died of a terminal illness, and then also kind of dealing with family health situations at home currently. And it's so valuable to be able to talk to someone and be able to open up about your struggles, and um, kind of have someone who helps and teaches you about like different coping mechanisms you can use, or even being able to reframe a lot of the challenges that you're having and be able to look at them in a new way. And so I I can I'm so appreciative that those folks exist that have the skills to be able to be that listener and of help walk through those types of struggles. And I would hope that people who have just recently learned about the concept of therapy actually um, approach it and like try it out for themselves if they feel like they're struggling. Um,
Yeah, and I think I agree. And I think that part of what needs to happen to bridge the gap between the elder generations is A, get more brown therapists in the field, which I think is starting to happen now, and B, show mental health as something that everyone has, but not necessarily mental illness as being something that everyone has. Promote therapy as something you can benefit from, even if you don't have a mental illness. Even if nothing in the DSM-5 applies to you, but you just need help with self-improvement and accomplishing certain goals that the general suggestions from family and friends may not be able to help you to get to. And I do think that, in my, you were asking me about, whether I receive pushback or not, or nasty comments about mental health inside my household. I do have noticed that at least my father holds the viewpoint that you shouldn't seek outside help at all unless the problem is severe, almost as though, your parents have failed you if you have to go that route type of thing.
yeah, that's Um, I wish that that feeling of I guess shame or didn't exist within like families around these types of topics, or these struggles. I think personally, like I've connected my family members to therapists recently, and it's been like super helpful in helping to navigate and deal with issues that maybe they can't deal with on their own, that they struggle a lot with. And so um that grace, having that grace, and like um the love to be able, the self-love even, to be able to recognize that this is something that is really important to me and can help benefit me in tremendous ways if I'm willing to pursue it and kind of give myself the support that I need. um I think I would love that for folks within the South Asian community to feel that way.
Yeah, and I think that's where we need to change the perception of where it comes from in terms of we need to change the perception that having mental health struggles either means you're psychotic or you're okay. We need to change the mindset that therapy is for someone who's suffering in that manner.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really appreciated too that you drew out in this book was that there are a lot of environmental factors that might also be contributing to the kind of the situations that and the like the mental health challenges that people are facing. And there were definitely some case studies in there where folks were struggling with a lot, and when you're in those types of situations, especially as a new immigrant, to like a place like the United States or to Canada, like you're and you don't have the social supports or networks around you, and you're not actively or proactively seeking out these supports, it can be very easy to fall into a lot of these struggles, or like these a pattern of certain emotions. And so I definitely saw that, especially in your journalistic approach to the writing. I think that really drew it out.
Yeah, I mean, intergenerational trauma is now a buzzword for a reason.
So, for those who might be struggling with mental health concerns or going through a variety of challenging periods in their own lives, are there any suggestions around like mental health or therapy that you would suggest to them?
And well, what I learned from the book is that a different form of therapy will work differently per individual. I think that it all kind of starts with, if you're new to your journey, maybe you can just try the traditional route and see where it takes you. I feel like I'm at a point personally where, I've done the traditional therapy before. So if and when I need therapy again, I'm going to try some of like the newer things like the somatic therapies, probably seek a therapist that's South Asian to see what working with one is like. Now, if you read my book, you'll see that a lot of people felt strongly about working with a South Asian therapist because you don't have to explain why your family members are the way they are and why you were raised the way you were raised. So, but then again, for some people, ethnicity isn't such an important factor. It all depends,
That's really
what your
useful,
goals are and
and
what you're struggling with.
hopefully folks are like see this, and if there is a desire to try therapy, are more open to it, and just understand that there is a lot of different kind of varieties of things within therapy to explore as well.
And it's not just therapy itself that's an option nowadays. It's also medication. It's also holistic wellness is a whole different umbrella alone too. And I think that in my journey has taught me to never say never to any of it.
That's really great. So, for folks who are interested in specifically connecting with you, how can they get in touch? And yes, please share.
Well, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I probably shouldn't spell out all of them. But what I could do is maybe send you my link tree and you could drop it in the comments.
Yes, definitely. So, in the description for our videos as well as our podcast, you'll be able to find a link to ways that you can connect with Mrinal, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for being on today. Really appreciated it, and I took a lot away from this conversation. I hope that our viewers and listeners did too.